Pirates Island was thousands of Imperial ships. The fleet was doing a thorough job.
Take us to the rebel base, and we'll spare your life!
It cawed. The entire jury-rigged rebel fleet was only a few islands to the east. Beyond that were only the pillars of heaven, a sea of endless blood-colored tornadoes. The rebellion was out of time, unless Renato could bring a game-changer. Maybe he could. Renato had found out where he could find the pieces of the Sky Ripper, the legendary weapon that had exiled the lost gods. Surely a legendary weapon could win the final battle. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino had sent Renato a desperate message saying he had a brilliant scheme to save the rebellion. If Renato could only rescue him. Renato dived the Farfarer towards the abyss. As he felt the heat of the jet stream, the Raven ships peeled off, not stable enough to follow him down there. Now it was time to choose. Lapino or the Sky Ripper? Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lapino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. The Ravens had figured out that Lapino was a rebel spy. If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? It was a bit windy up here. People were frightened these days. Just 2 weeks past, Renato had sneaked through an empty town and listened to the Ravens caw about the Emperor's new taste in ritual sacrifice. Renato's blood was up. He just needed to smash something. we just agree to disagree? Said Renato. No? Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lupino. Where had the mad rabbit got to? Renato felt like he was ready to learn new things. It was starting to come back to him. Something you never completely forgot, like how to freeze time when attacking. The more he fought, the more he'd probably remember. Renato felt a chill run down his back. Or possibly a flea. Ready to blossom within him, or something. Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lupino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Renato recognized the cards. It was Lupino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am. The Ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, see, this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia. We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. Zenobia wasn't just the Emperor's daughter, of course. She'd been Renato's best friend in Sword Fu school. And you're still mad for her, the rabbit reminded him. They'd been close. She'd told him things no one else knew. But she'd never told him who she really was. She knows all the Emperor's plans, chuckled the master spy. She won't give them up easily. She'll tell the interrogators, all right, said Lapino. Taking her would change the game, all right. The city was already under Zenobia's control. I had to admire her efficiency. Renato shivered at the thought of Zenobia at the mercy of the interrogators. Could he really turn her over to them? But this was war. It wasn't meant to be pretty. The city was already under Zenobia's control. I had to admire her efficiency. Renato shivered at the thought of Zenobia at the mercy of the interrogators. Could he really turn her over to them? But this was war. It wasn't meant to be pretty. Hero wall. Sword. Ice wall. Ice cube. You blinked. So, what's this plan of yours?
Use me as bait, said Lupino. And he outlined a slightly complicated plan that involved geese, a net, setting the Farfarer a little bit on fire, Lupino dressing as an old blind toad, and Renato hiding inside a monstrous watermelon.
What could possibly go wrong? Thought Renato.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sure you know better, said Lupino. If I craft a sword now, it's going to be really short.
He'd missed his old skills. He welcomed them back like he was at a reunion.
Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom. She was curled up on her bed. Oh, He'd forgotten how beautiful she was. How sleek. How soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She became smoke. And he noticed he had a blade to his throat. "Stay a while," purred a familiar voice. "Did you really think you could capture me?" Zenobia said as her ship lifted off. "Now I just wanted some privacy." Renato said, "Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you?" And he told her why. His Imperial Majesty wanted to bring the lost gods back. They could make him immortal. But to seal the bargain, he needed a sacrifice. Someone who truly loved him. "You're lying." She was furious. "You can't prove that." "I can." And so they set sail for the Nexus. The scientists at the observatory have resurrected one of his victims. Well, he's not exactly alive, but it can talk, and it can't lie. You took a big risk. You know, I could just cast a spell to make you tell me where the rebel base is, and you wouldn't consider that cheating? She frowned. Ugh, fine. Let's go get your witness. The rebellion had started after atrocities that the Empire hushed up. Renato had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred for one book. He had slept in a burnt village. Dead kittens and puppies had come to tell him what the Emperor had done to them. Who needed bridges anyway? Renato wondered if it wasn't cheaper to build bridges and stairs. He wasn't that good. Yet. So much. It was time to turn it into something he could use.
She caught up with him. She seemed troubled. All right, out with it, he said. He sent his ravens to search for an ancient crystal. Something called the Iblis Stone. Iblis? Isn't he one of the lost gods? He shivered. A stone dedicated to one of the lost gods. Oh, that could give great power. But what would the god demand in return? If they didn't want their things broken, they really ought to make them stronger. The scientists on this island had been investigating the Emperor's dark rituals on their own. They were neutral in the civil war engulfing the Empire, but they could see that the dark magics the old Toad had loosed were changing the world. Bernardo hoped he and Zenobia weren't putting them in danger. Energy spheres. Easy to dodge, but boy, did they sting if you didn't pay attention. Hated warlocks, the way they stayed back and lobbed pain and death from a distance. Cowards. Really dangerous, effective cowards.
shy. Bernardo felt a little better. The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The ravens had taken care to burn the reanimated witness to cinders. Zenobia stared around, shocked. The scientists had been neutral. They had no part in the rebellion. "Take me to your council," she said, shaken. "I have things to tell them." It was what Renato had gambled on. The Zenobia would turn against her father once she knew his madness. But the rebel base was secret. Could he really risk taking the Emperor's daughter there? Renato reached Lapino by far-speaker Toad, the one creature the ravens had left alive at the observatory.
I'll meet up with you at the base,
Lapino said through the Toad. "Good thinking." Renato gave him the coordinates. "There's a shuttle here I can, borrow." Renato found Zenobia in the chart room. "I've been having awful dreams," she said. "Dead kittens and worse. I thought they were only dreams, you know. Why would anyone want the lost gods back? In those days, the favorite of a god could become immortal." She held herself and shivered. "He wants to become an eater of souls." "Well, I'm not afraid of dying. Just dying of boredom," Renato said, but she didn't laugh. Silence fell as they flew towards the ruins of the city of Ubar, where the rebellion leadership was hiding. If Zenobia couldn't help them fight off her father, no one could. As they touched the ground, he could smell the ravens and hear their hungry caws in the distance. "They're probably looking for me," she said. "You go on ahead." She had that fiery look in her eyes that he'd always loved. It was a bit odd, though. How easy she'd been to convince. It was what he'd gambled on, but he'd expected more of an argument. She'd always loved to argue. She considered it the fastest way to the truth. Maybe she'd long suspected the truth. Sometimes all it took was taking the bandages from your eyes. That must be it, he told himself.
Bernardo, smash!
There was an inscription. Praise the sun. What were these poles exactly? Parking meters from the time of the lost gods? Firewalls only let you through if they think you're hot enough. They caught their breath under a ruined arch. "It's beautiful," she said. "This was the library of Rubar," he said. "Your father's ravens thought they had an ancient book." She nodded. Was she crying? This was exactly what I wanted, Renata thought. To turn her to our cause. So, why do I feel something is terribly wrong? Because nothing ever goes this smoothly, is why. Anyone ever tell you have a lovely eye? No? Huh? A lever? That was new. Most people still use doorknobs.
long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. But there were still so many games to play, Renato thought as he died. Once again, Renato was dead right. Or actually just dead.
Have to stop.
Council toads swarmed around Zenobia, shocked she was there, shocked she had changed sides. Then the walls exploded. He heard toads croaking, "Oh, the ravens!" Blackbirds were pouring through holes everywhere.
It's a trap!
Cried the council speaker. In the confusion, he saw flashes of magic. Then Zenobia being hustled off by Imperial troops. So she had betrayed him after all. Renato ran for his ship. The Farfarer flew into the clouds, barely losing the Imperial ravens pursuing him. The rebellion was lost, and he had lost it. There was nothing to do but find Zenobia and make her pay for her treachery. His heart ached. He still loved her. But he had trusted her, and he had been a fool. She would be back at the fleet, gloating with her mad, bloodthirsty father. For all Renato knew, she was helping him bring back the old lost gods back from their exile. Renato landed in the middle of the Imperial fleet. The rebels were losing badly. Without leadership, it was a slaughter. Renato felt strangely free, trying not to think about how he had lost the war, trying not to think about how he had loved Zenobia, blinded himself to treachery. That's what it meant to be a hero, to keep on fighting after the most bitter of betrayals. to never know if you could trust anyone. Cats. What a waste of fur. Nice. That could be useful. The portal was heavily guarded. It must go someplace they really didn't want it to go. Once, he'd found a Superman issue #1 in mint condition in a jar he'd broken. He planned to keep breaking things until he had the whole series.
Shall we dance?
Con, the lead raven. There were stickers all over the platform for really hot lady bosses, with pictures and addresses and everything. What had happened to Lupino? Had the Mad Rabbit fled to safety? Or was he forlornly carrying on like the few rebels Renata could see here or there? Ugh, it didn't matter anymore. All there was slash and spin, parry and lunge, over and over as he fought his way across the fleet. All there was finding the girl he'd once loved, who had used his love against him and putting as big a hole in her heart as she'd left in his. He was sort of yanking his own chain, wasn't he? And suddenly, Zenobia was there, advancing a Lapino. So the Mad Rabbit had survived. "Save me, or I'm done for!" screamed Lapino. Zenobia turned, showing her teeth in a smile. "You're alive!" Renato ran towards the witch. "Lapino's the one who betrayed you!" she shouted. "He warned my father!" Renato sank his sword into the witch before she could fool him again. She stared at him, heartbroken. "No! Lapino's the traitor!" Then he felt a knife in his back. "I'm afraid she's right," said the Mad Rabbit. "Ain't I a stinker?" Then the sun went out. Okay, that was weird. He could have sworn he just died. Instead, he was on the Farfarer, sailing away from Ubar. And it was still burning. He'd fled burning Ubar years ago, hadn't he? And now he was back there. Had all those years fighting the Empire been nothing but a vision into the future? A useful vision if it was true. He'd learned something. Lapino was a traitor. Renato had suspected there was something wrong with the Mad Rabbit. But now he knew there was malice behind his goofiness. He'd made bad choices. But now, when the real battle came, he wouldn't make those choices. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The book's pages began to flip backwards, towards the beginning. And he realized that his adventure was just beginning. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base.
They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Or so a scholar in the mountains had told him. Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor.
Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis Stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Reynardo. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Reynardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Reynardo really leave an old friend to the Ravens?
Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces. What could have brought them to light? This Emperor, Isengrim III, had once been kind, but he'd gone mad. And now he was conducting secret, obscene rituals to bring back the lost gods. Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the earth? It was more than Reynardo could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it.
As he set foot on the island, Reynardo couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lupino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Reynardo felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper?
Reynardo never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it?
These things could really use a hand.
The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the lost gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Reynardo had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one.
If only he had some way to break the ice, or convince it he was a friend. These were really very well made, weren't they? was dead tired. Then he was just dead. So this was what it was like to die. Not nearly as much fun as they said. Two eyes, good. One eye, dead. Ah, a puzzle. Renata loved puzzles. Except that he couldn't figure them out. On the other hand, if there was a puzzle, it was probably meant to keep people away from something good. As for the gate, well, he could take her or leave her. Sorry, it's best I could do. It wasn't his fault. They looked so breakable. There it was. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway. The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach.
Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. It was a no-brainer. He'd sacrificed his old friend Lapino to get the armature. And the armature was useless by itself, only a series of coils and wheels. War demanded sacrifices, and he would make more before the end. He would have to choose the greatest good, no matter how much it cost him. Zenobia. Well, he would see her sooner or later, across a battlefield or a sword's point before all this was over. He was sure of that. The power was in the core. Obviously, he had to get the core. He looked up at the old trees around him. They were so big and so old. They'd been there before he was born, and they'd be there after he'd passed into legend. Was he confronting his own unimportance? What had got into him? He was no philosopher. Anyway, who cares? He was plenty important. He was a hero, and soon he'd prove it. With materials like this, he could probably make a really nice pair of barbecue tongs. Or even a sword. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. What dreams may come, he thought. And then he found out. There were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths. Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest. The mice and rabbits. Where had they gone? He was getting hungry too. This was an unhealthy place to be. That he didn't feel more pain. Just a bit dizzy. Whew. The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark art, and he hadn't liked what he smelt and saw there. This felt like that. As quick as he could, He wrangled the icosahedron into the armature. The wheels began to spin, then glow. The sick feeling quickly spun away. Now he only felt sad. He had lost good friends for this war apparatus. Maybe Lupino wasn't such a good friend. That made him feel better. He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now, he had to make his next move. There was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of super weapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it. Renato had never been much of a student. At Swordfu School, he'd never read the books, just looked at the pictures. And Zenobia. But weapons he understood. His gut told him that the Skyripper would work great. He would use it to take out the Imperial outpost. And what's the worst that could happen? The thing wouldn't work, and then he'd take it to the scientists. Right? Exactly. As he set out down the path, Renato wondered why the parts of the Skyripper had only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had discarded it. This Emperor, Isengrim III, had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Perhaps that was bringing up lost artifacts. How perfect, then, that the Skyripper would reappear to be his destruction. Well, they really needed to redecorate anyway. Renato wondered if his future self had commissioned these poles.
was tired of slaughtering ravens. Maybe it was time to test out the new weapon. He turned a knob on the Sky Ripper. It made strange, mechanical noises. The wheels spun faster. It began to hum. The Sky Ripper was following his every step. At least it acknowledged him as the master. But there was no trigger. How was he supposed to fire it? Fire, he said. Nothing happened. Well, maybe it just needed to warm up. After all, it hadn't been fired in thousands of years. A crafting bench. Renato wondered what he could make with it. The Sky Ripper was making a whining noise now, and its wheels were spinning so fast he could no longer see them. Renato had a thought. "Please?" he asked. The Sky Ripper began to glow. Boom! The outpost burst into flame. Ravens flapped out screaming, wings on fire. The base was his. The far speaker toad came hopping out. "Renato!" It croaked, sounding like a toad version of Zenobia.
Don't use the Sky Ripper. It will destroy the world.
"Yeah, sure it will," cracked Renato. "Pull the other one."
If you don't trust me, go see Calaveras.
That sounded sensible. Why did she always have to sound sensible all the time? Oh, it was infuriating. Of course she would say that. He was supposed to hurry and bring the Sky Ripper to the council so the rebels could actually win the war. But what if she was right? Damn it. Just this once, he would not let Zenobia get into his head with her logic and her wisdom and her appeals to reason. He was a fox. He'd go with his instincts, and it would all work out like it always did. Oh, he was sounding like a reckless idiot, even to himself. But if there was one thing Renato could never bring himself to do, it was turn back on a decision he'd made. Imperials were flapping and cawing all around the ruins. They must be panicking with rumors flying of the superweapon. Maybe they hoped to find and destroy the base before he could put the Sky Ripper into action. The Sky Ripper was whining and heating up. It would be time to use that energy soon. Smashing things was fun.
This would be the perfect place for a tic-tac-toe board.
Good to practice your moves, thought Renato. Renato had never had a super weapon before. He'd single-handedly taken down an Imperial base. He felt good. He'd resisted all the distractions that were thrown in his path. He couldn't wait to attack the enemy fleet. What was really fun was hooking yourself onto a moving ship. What was Zenobia talking about? This was a fantastic weapon. Ravens burst into flames with just a touch of its killer beam. He was tempted to leave it on all the time, but he didn't want to accidentally slice off some council toad's head or tongue. She'd been trying to distract him. Well, this time, no one was going to distract him.
That was awesome!
Wasn't making a dent in those shields.
Bet you never saw that coming. The long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. Should have done a barrel roll, he thought, as he died. As he headed towards the council chamber, Renato felt everyone watching him.
"You've saved the rebellion," said the council speaker. "Frankly, we were afraid you'd turn aside to save that idiot Lapino."
Not bloody likely, Renato told them, feeling he was maybe being a bit harsh on the poor mad rabbit.
"If you never make sacrifices," he said, "you're probably not doing the right thing." The speaker nodded. "Are you ready to lead the charge?" "Let's roll," he said, with grim satisfaction. Renato set sail for the fleet. The Sky Ripper had lost its wine. It was humming now, as if it had taken some time to seat properly. He had always been irresponsible. This time, he'd done the right thing, made the hard decisions. He was a real hero. He hadn't let himself be distracted by old friends or old lovers turned enemies. Finally, he could be proud of himself.
He was ready. So was Sky Ripper. The Sky Ripper had a will of its own. It picked out its own targets and set them on fire.
This was going to be a short battle. He would set the ships on fire if he didn't need them to get to the Emperor. And he wondered if he'd see Zenobia, or if she'd flee. Wouldn't she be proud of him? At least, a bit of respect. He'd become an all-conquering hero.
This was way better than being able to shrink down to the size of an ant. What was that all about, anyway?
Sometimes, Renato really hated inanimate objects.
Imagine if you built a house on one of these things. Oh, that would be amazing. It would be like having a boat. There was a parchment on a signpost. It was from her.
Every time you fire, you risk the destruction of the universe. That's insane. We surrender. A trick? Maybe she really believed it. He could hear horns blaring the retreat. Maybe it was true. Maybe they had one.
was always a rush. Bye-bye, life, he thought. Hello, emptiness. Guess now I find out what's next, he thought. And there was Zenobia, wearing the white robes of surrender. She came and kneeled before him. Why didn't you listen to me? I was trying to save you too. You're the enemy, he said. I was never your enemy, Renato. Then she spoke a terrible word and made a gesture with her hand. She stopped moving, covered in frost, and he wondered why she'd frozen herself. Then the Sky Ripper froze, and then, for a moment, he felt very cold and discovered that he couldn't move. The next thing he knew, the sun was a giant, monstrously red. It took up half the sky, and he was in a parched red desert. And then he was on fire. Renato stared at the book. He was still alive. Again. And still only flying away from burning Ubar. Had he lived that adventure? Or only dreamt it? Had he really died? It felt so real, not like a dream at all. And he'd lost again. Oh, he hated that. But he had made different choices. And he'd lost in a different way. It was the book, wasn't it? Oracles showed you your destiny. But this was showing him different ways he could die miserably. Thanks a bunch, book, he thought. But these were destinies that he did not have to fulfill. But he'd learned another true thing. Zenobia still had feelings for him. But that meant there must be a destiny where he survived and won, right? Otherwise, what was the point? And with that, the book's pages fluttered back once more to the beginning, and the clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced, or so a scholar in the mountains had told him. Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Reynardo. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Reynardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Reynardo really leave an old friend to the Ravens? The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis stone. It sounded ominous. It sounded powerful. If the Emperor was searching for it, it must be dangerous. And so, Reynardo went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? Sword from the south was terrific for barbecuing sausages and ravens. This is why heroes are called dashing, Reynardo thought. See? Dashing? Get it? Burnt fur. Yes. The ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late. When Reynardo went to the china shop, for some reason the owner was always nervous. could have gone better, thought Renato as he died. Renato wondered idly if people who had built these poles had really, really long tentacles. Sweet! A gem. All he needed now was a workbench, and he could slot it into his gauntlet. To everything, there is a season. He turned over and died. The Ravens, at least, could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. Haven't you always wanted to do that?
couldn't be good for global warming. It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. I can make you mighty. Who said that? Give me blood. It was the stone, eager, thirsty. Kill the Emperor's daughter. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and Renato wasn't sure he really wanted to be Emperor. Why not capture the core of Skyripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the Transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. "It's the core," said the stone anxiously. Was he listening to a talking rock? But the rock had a point. If the stone could truly turn him into a powerful warrior, he could defeat the Emperor with the very weapon the wicked old toad had sought for himself. To be a hero, you had to sacrifice old friends sometimes, especially when they've become enemies. As he placed the impossibly black crystal in his gauntlet, Renato had a sudden vision. Charred fields covered in dead ravens below a black sun. Was it the time of the lost gods before the Transcendent Emperor? Was it the future? Feed these souls, it whispered. Take the power. He could feel the stone's hunger for souls, its thirst for blood.
All right, I get it.
This was going to be interesting. Goat. Take the goat across first, Renato thought. But it was too late. He felt like Tarzan. on Zenobia's island were no match for Reynardo. They screamed as the stones sucked out their souls. And with each death, he felt stronger. Take the power, the stone told him. It was definitely easier to fight inanimate objects. Hero wall, hero sword, firewall, fire extinguisher. Zenobia was leading the Imperial Ravens here. She loved to be in the vanguard, where the danger was, where she needed her wits. Reynardo pitied whoever she was fighting, especially if it was him. Not everyone knew how to use magical gems. Of course, not everyone had magical gem gauntlets like he did. Zenobia was waiting for Reynardo. She was alone, confident as always. Fire danced at the tips of her claws.
Are you here to surrender?
She seemed as cocksure as he felt. But she didn't know he had the stone. And I've missed you too, love. He chuckled. She spotted the stone and bolted without another word. Hey! Hey, a workbench! He could try out his new bling. For some reason, Reynardo remembered a fairy tale his mother had told him. About a land where only the apes talked. Animals went around without clothes. Finally, Renato caught up to her. He had never seen her scared before. At school, she'd been the determined, brave one. Now her eyes were wide, frightened. He didn't like seeing her this way. "Kill her," whispered the stone. "You cannot win your rebellion without it." "Please." "No," said Zenobia. "Not that way." Oh, they had been so close once. Could he really feed her soul to his demonic gem? But if he spared her, he would not get the full power of the stone. Oh, how could he be the hero he wanted to be? With a flick of his wrist, he slashed Zenobia's throat. Her eyes widened even more. And then the light went out of them. Renato felt amazing. Power was rushing into him like water from a burst dam. Oh, such brilliance, exulted the Iblis stone. Tasty. He felt a bit bad about killing her. He was pretty sure she still loved him. But needs must when the devil drives. Renato returned to the Farfarer and set a course for the Nexus. The Empire had a communication outpost there. He could call the Emperor directly. It was time to seize the outpost and let the Emperor know what he had done. The Nexus was beautiful. He'd never realized how beautiful. Everything glowed. The wind was so sweet. The sun so soft. The stones so warm. The black raven feathers. Black feathers. Suddenly, his eyes are filled with them. He's falling through smoke under a dead sun. A voice calls him home. Is this a vision? Whose? Is it the time of the lost gods? Or the future? No matter. What mattered now was killing his way to the Imperial outpost and challenging the Emperor from there. Once you try it, you're hooked. Up ahead was Lupino. What was he doing here?
Bernardo! Hey, buddy! Hey there, old buddy! Please don't kill me.
Why would I kill you? Asked Bernardo, although he had been thinking about it.
Well, you've become... And look, I mean, no disrespect at all here. Kind of evil? Maybe you should, I don't know, go to the mountains to have a think. See if maybe you're sure the stone is not all that healthy a thing to keep.
I suppose you wanted, Bernardo said, and poked Lupino in the chest for emphasis. Oh, had he just killed Lupino? Oh, damn it. There was an inscription on the platform. Balaleka lessons, with an address. Renato rampaged through the Imperial outpost like a water buffalo rampaging. At the last moment, he remembered not to kill the Far Speaker Toad. After all, he wanted a word with the Emperor. But there was only silence. Haha! The Emperor was scared, like little girl. Well, he would gather the rebel army and slaughter the Imperial fleet. Applauded the Iblistone. Tremendous. Then the Emperor would have to answer his Far Speaker, wouldn't he? Who are you? Asked a distant voice that sounded uncomfortably like Zenobia. What have you become? The mountains. Go to the mountains, urged another that sounded a bit like Lupino. Called the Rebel Council to let them know to gather their forces. Then he killed the Far Speaker Toad. Why? Well, because to make sure his sword was sharp. Oh no, that's awful. So no one else could use it. Yes, that's it. Then he set off for the ruins and the secret rebel base. The ruins were crawling with ravens. Probably looking for the secret base, Renato thought. But then he realized they're probably looking for me. They must be very scared of me. Well, here I am. You are the honest warrior ever, whispered the Iblistone. And he had to agree with it, for once. Who was as good as Renato?
I wonder what I could make with all these sword crafting materials, thought Renato.
Renato hoped his mother wasn't watching. Zenobia, Hypatia, the kid's mother. Renato had never thought he'd date a librarian. He'd always figured himself for the barmaid type. But then, he'd never figured the library of Ubar would have comic books, or that Hypatia would know anything about them. He missed her. Renato was so happy. The stone was the best friend he'd ever had. Really, who would bury such a treasure in the desert? Soon, he'd go rally the rebellion and usher a new age for the islands of Erda. Urged the stone. Let me make you Emperor. Come to think of it, Renato thought as he put down another raven, why shouldn't I be Emperor? How did anybody get to be Emperor anyway? By making war. Not counting the transcendent Emperor, obviously, who had banished the lost gods and started time. Yes, he should be Emperor. He would make a great Emperor. Right, Stone? Boy, if looks could kill.
long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. He was on fire. So far, so good. Should have died a pirate, he thought. Flames really bring out your eyes.
Going spectacularly well, thought Renato.
Renato strode into the council. Let's do this thing. Let's make me emperor. They looked confused and nervous. Ah, had he mentioned the emperor thing? Yeah, he meant to bring that up later. I mean, let's go win this rebellion. He waved his sword around encouragingly. They ran. Cowards. He'd stop them. He cut down a few to inspire the others. But soon, there was no one to cut down. Well then, he'd have to attack the fleet alone. More for me, he said. Unless it was the stone that said it. Traitors. Traitors, all of them. They'd run rather than following him, rather than cheering him. What should he do to the cowards? Anything he wanted to. After all, he was a true hero, the best warrior there ever was. No one could stop him now. But first, finish him. The Emperor, that is. Where was the rebel fleet? They weren't even trying an assault. They were going to miss a day in history. The downfall of this dynasty, and a new one to take its place. He didn't have to kill all the ravens. He could enslave them, and enslave the toads too. All the animals would worship him as a god, for he had once been a god. They would willingly give him their blood and their souls. And the world would change, would become familiar again.
The port led right into the middle of the fleet. It was a glaring weakness in the defense.
was a radiance at the end of a long, dark tunnel. Mother, you thought? He was practically sure he'd find something useful in one of these things. Where did that go to? Going to hurt. Actually, it already did. Through his armor. Oh dear, that wasn't good. Bernardo was glowing with dark power. Already the sun had dimmed. He could do anything, he realized. He could wrap the island safely in smoke again. He was beyond a hero. He was going to become a god again. How odd, he thought, that the Iblis Stone had nothing to say about any of this. Well, no matter. Once he killed this petty Toad Emperor, he would bring back the Black Sun. Building these platforms was so expensive, they'd run out of budget for guardrails. Touche, he said, and died.
He found the Emperor and the Council huddling by his ship, plotting. They saw him and cowered before him.
Back to hell, fiend.
Croaked the Emperor desperately.
In the name of the Transcendent Emperor!
Croaked the speaker. They held some arcane items he didn't recognize. He simply flexed his will and sucked their souls out of their bodies. And Iblis exulted. It is finished. And the void that had been a mere stone on a sword expanded. It stretched and ripped like a vast womb. And a gaze, black and pitiless as the sun, passed through the void into the land. And so time ended. And just like that, he was alive again, and back on the Farfarer, still fleeing burning Ubar. The book was still open before him. So, the book was a portal. It took you to the future when your destinies would branch. He had failed and died 3 times, but he'd learned another true thing. The Iblis Stone was evil. It would try to corrupt anyone who used it. But he was starting to feel like he was getting the hang of this. There was a way through to victory. He could feel it. He just had to keep running the path of destinies. With that, the book fluttered back to the beginning, and he fell into it. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Or so a scholar in the mountains had told him. Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Lupino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lupino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. Lupino's frantic message said that the Ravens were going to kill him for being a rebel spy. And that he had a clever plan. If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse. Or so Lupino had told him over the Far Speaker anyway. Lupino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen the winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? The artisans he was creating employment for. Truly, he was a job creator. was odd. Bernardo had been here, at this exact place, at this exact time. But this time, there were so many more ravens. Sometimes, at home, he'd wave his sword around for hours. Renato thought of the Iblis stone and shivered. He had no business messing with ancient, cruel artifacts. What he needed was his friends around him. Clear eyes, full hearts. Can't lose. Ooh, what's there? Don't look down, he thought. Renato had heard stories of a dungeon where chests were filled with potions and weapons. Fairy tales.